Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
This is what you do when you've just found that statement handbag on eBay and you want to build an entire wardrobe around it. You start selling to keep buying. Yep, on eBay. Over that all-black everything phase? List it and buy all the color. Feeling more vintage than ever? It's out with the new and in with the pre-loved. Next thing you know, you've refreshed your wardrobe basically without spending a dime. Yeah, eBay, the place to buy and sell new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster Sam Baker. My final guest of the season is the fashion designer Bella Freud. Bella launched her eponymous label in 1990. Over 30 years later, it remains resolutely independent, one of the very few that hasn't been subsumed by a fashion conglomerate. Bella makes clothes for wearing, and they've become a byword for women who want to be glamorous but not girly, with a bit of added wit. Her iconic word jumpers are one of the most covetable individual fashion items, bar none, as her instant sellout collaboration with M&S proved. Bella has always played with her heritage. Her father, the artist Lucian Freud, designed her famous dog logo, and her great-grandfather was Sigmund Freud, widely credited as the inventor of psychoanalysis. And now she's launched a podcast, Fashion Neurosis with Bella Freud, where she literally puts celebrities on the couch to analyse their relationship with style. Eric Cantona, Zadie Smith, Trini Woodall, and even Kate Moss have succumbed, and I have to say it's a real eye-opener.
I remember someone saying to me, if you feel weird about something, then it's weird. And that was a really useful, especially being in slightly kind of frightening situations.
I met Bella at home in northwest London to talk about growing up outside convention and how she finally shook off her childhood coping mechanisms. We discussed the wonderful feeling of progress that's come with aging, what we can gain from unravelling life's knots, and the impact of losing both of her parents in 1 week. Bella also told me how her body image shaped her designs and how she's learnt to appreciate her body as she's aged. Fashion is a magic carpet, she says, and she's the living proof. Thank you for coming on The Shift, Bella, and thank you for having me in your fabulous house. I've got such room envy.
Thank you. I love this place. I built it, and I just would happily stay here the whole time, actually. I don't really like traveling. I love coming home, and it's very, very quiet and peaceful here. And I just feel good as soon as I walk through the door. Even sometimes I get terrible headaches, and occasionally I've walked in and it's just gone as I've walked in.
Oh, wow.
And so thank you.
From outside, you look like an insider. You know, you look like you've got friends and a life. In other words, are you actually a secret introvert?
Totally. Yeah, I don't know anyone who feels like an insider, really. I think all those people that I know, everyone seems to have so much self-doubt. And I kind of get it because, when I was growing up, we were outsiders. You know, my mother was a hippie and my parents weren't married. They didn't even live together. All our sort of positioning in life was outside of the conventional. So I've grown up with that since I was, from the very moment I was born. And so I'm so used to it that it's comfortable. I'm very comfortable with being in my own kind of world, and I've made it how I like it. And I enjoy a certain amount of time being alone. I really like that. But I've never really been in a group as such, but maybe that's made me good at sort of being interested in people and being friends with people. There are certain people I'm really drawn to, I'm fascinated, and I was like that at school as well. I would kind of have like an adoration of certain people in my school and wonder how I could be a good co-conspirator, that kind of thing.
When did you first become aware as a little girl that your family setup was different?
I mean, I don't think I ever wasn't aware of it, because most people had, what was then a the family, the mum and dad and a little house or whatever. And we never had that. We never actually had our own place to live. We always moved about and lived in other people's houses. And, I saw that it was difficult, but that was what I'd grown up with. So there was certain aspects of normality that I longed for, me and my sister. That seemed exotic to have that regularity, often to do with, things that people ate, like they had snacks and stuff, and we didn't have snacks. Everything took about 24 hours to cook. So I was envious of those things, but the other things I felt like, I suppose they were familiar things, and I enjoyed that.
What was little Bella like?
I seem to have had this drive ever since I can remember. I liked to have I was quite fierce. I had these things I wanted to do, or I was quite self-sufficient, probably, which wasn't necessarily ideal way to be, but I was, and I learned how to be very good at that. And I learned how to be agile in an unfamiliar situation. That sort of served me. It kind of works for and against. I think it made me daring, but it also made me, depressed as well. Because this feeling as a child, as a young person, that if I wanted things to happen, I had to make them happen. How I wanted it was a bit of pressure. And but on the other hand, I discovered that if I tried to make things happen, I could. But sometimes they got sort of wrapped up in tests for myself. And that's like not progress. That becomes very insular. Testing to see how strong I was. Could I endure this? Could I do that? Could I run 2 miles when I was 10? Or I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want my son to have that kind of attitude particularly, but I had it.
Was that a reaction to the kind of peripateticness, do you think, of your childhood, kind of introducing your own strictures?
Yeah, I think so, very much. I sort of had this kind of strategy that made me feel I know A to B type of thing. And but I was thinking earlier this morning before you arrived about things that I wished I'd done. I don't really have any regrets, but I have a couple of regrets. When I started my own label in the 90s, and I remember being invited to this party that Martin Margiela threw, he was sort of known, no one knew what he looked like. Anyway, ID and Martin Margiela had a party in Florence, and they invited me. My mentors, who were my dad and Vivienne Westwood, they didn't go to they didn't do anything except work, so I didn't go. And then years later, I think it was one of the editors of ID.
Terry and Trish.
And they said, "Oh, you didn't come." And I, idiot, what possessed me? Why did I think any sort of enjoyment was, I would take my eye off the ball and I would forget how to do my job? And I remember that. I mean, it's such a sort of small thing, but there was most definitely, and I was thinking this morning how Alexander McQueen invited me to his early shows and I didn't go because I was busy, always busy, working. I don't know what I was doing, but the more time you give yourself to do something, the more time it takes. But if you give yourself less, you do everything within that time. And thinking, oh God, I really wished I'd done a few more of those things. And I think it links back to how I was as a child. If I do things in this kind of Alexander the Great style. He was always my hero. I thought, I have to know how to cut through the knot, not faff around trying to unravel it. But actually, there's lots to be gained by untangling things and finding other things. And I just always thought that I need to know. It has to be such an immediate, my fight or flight has to have the perfect outcome. And now I'm kind of discovering that I can get great outcomes without being so severe.
Is that a product of getting older?
Well, it's inadvertently from getting older, but of getting wiser through wanting to learn about things, not just about myself, but about everything, and learning not to be fazed by the moments in between having an idea and realizing it, even if it's in a relationship or, developing a piece of work or a new idea, appreciating that in unknown space in between, which is totally nerve-wracking when you're kind of addicted to, 2 and 2, 4, or even 400. So I'm getting the hang of that in-between thing and kind of getting the hang of enjoying it too, or not being associated with, if I don't know what I'm doing, it must be because something's wrong. But all it means is I haven't got there yet. So this is a new phase in my life that I am enjoying that.
So it is like you're finally kind of shaking off some of the, I don't want to say coping mechanisms, that would be your podcast, not mine. But yeah, that you developed when you were really young.
No, I am. So any feeling of progress at any point in life is a wonderful feeling. It just feels like there's so much there, no matter how old you are, that there's loads to be had out of it.
I don't know about you, but I feel a bit like I'm actually more open to life now than I was probably 10, 15 years ago. That at that point, I was still very much kind of like you, busy, mustn't show any weakness, got to look like I know what I'm doing, mustn't be sick, all of those things.
Yeah, no, I find that too. My kind of anxieties are much less, and that's such a relief. They don't kind of sink me like they used to. I don't get so wrapped up in the superstition of things. I can sort of stay level, even when I'm having an attack of, the fears or whatever it is I get. I can just hold on and think, it's just happening, just stay with. And also, I find when I feel like, the sort of energy force goes down and anxious, if I find out how someone else is or do something for someone else, I know it sounds sort of ghastly in a way, but it actually gets me out of myself. And then I realize things are okay because I don't have to do the same thing. It's not the same repertoire every time. That can shift my mood and remind me that progress is happening, even if it's even ordinary things like tidying up. And there are all sorts of things to do with like chaos that I've changed in my life in the last 10 years. And I didn't know that it would be changing to be able to be less chaotic, because I was so used to it.
Well, you were used to chaos.
Yeah, but I used to be really late for everything. I was so late for everything. So every time I went to meet someone, I had this same extreme panic of, what am I doing? Why is this happening? So I would arrive there in this stupid frame of mind, and then it started changing, and it was just so much fun, because I used to think that if I set off early, what I considered to be early, which was on time, I was wasting this time that I could be doing. Maybe I'd have a brilliant idea in that time. Now I do the opposite. I find I have the brilliant idea in this time where I'm not, all my kind of intelligence or, the things that give me good ideas is busy having a freak out about being late. I mean, that's the most banal thing on earth. How stupid. So now I develop this new set of habits of leaving on time, and I still kind of get such a kick out of it. But what I get a kick out of is what it brings me. It brings me this whole, like another life almost in my head. And these things to do with being older, I just love. I really love it.
It's so interesting hearing you say that, because what you were saying about being late and then being stressed because you're late, you could be describing me. And I'm much better too now. But I do always feel like there's something wrong with me if I'm early.
I used to think that, but now I don't. I just think, this is great. I have some time to think. If I'm early, I love it. And I see that it's like a club that people are in and they all get it. And very, very occasionally. And I also notice how few people are late. Like some people are late and I think, oh, I know where you're at, and then there's a boring conversation about why someone's late. It's like, shut up, it's fine, you're here or whatever. It's so rare that it happens. But the last time I met up with someone and they were so late, they were nearly an hour late.
Oh my God.
And I just thought,
that's really late.
It was such a waste. I remember doing that. I remember being nearly an hour late for someone who'd given me their time. This kind of very bigwig type of businessman, and just the look of disappointment when I actually showed up. And I wrote, there was nothing to talk about because it had been destroyed. I had destroyed it. And it was awful. I remember every second of that feeling, and it was about 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
Was it a bit intentional, seeing how far you could push it?
I think, yeah. I mean, obviously I didn't think it was, but my shrink said to me, when I asked him why I was late, and he said, I think it's a love test. And I think, yeah, it's pathetic. This awful kind of death wish of, will they still be there when I arrive? Will they still can I win them round? That was my kind of success, my measure of success, even though I didn't really understand what I was doing. But this thing of losing them and trying to win them back was it took up a lot of time. I never wanted to use my time like that again, ever. It's anathema. Even hearing myself saying it now, I'm just so grateful that I don't have to running in those kind of things that ran me so much, and just these ingrained habits of self-destructive behavior.
I get it totally, because I'm listening to you and thinking about it. Most of the rows over the years that I had with my husband were to do with me being extraordinarily late to meet him. Always thought that there was a good reason. I'd been really busy at work. I'd been trying to get out the door, and someone had said, can you just look at this? Can you just do that? And I never saw it from his perspective. What I was doing was endlessly putting other people before him. But of course now, it wasn't conscious at the time. It was obviously unconscious. But now I can absolutely see that, and how many evenings I ruined. It
is the most aggressive thing that you can do to someone, to be late for them, to be, to really imprint that anything matters than just being there when you've made an agreement to meet. It's such an aggressive act. And it's just a terrible kind of story that runs underneath, because of course it's not about anything, but just you either do those things. And
were you consciously a different sort of parent than your parents?
Very much so. My mother was late for me every single time, and it was depressing, really. I wanted to be very noticing as a parent, as it's hard to say things to people when you feel under. I wanted to be someone who I hoped would say, is everything okay? Or you seem this way or that, or just someone who was present to the mood shifts, because of having that a lot in my life. And I'm quite attuned to that. So I wanted just to be a safe port, even if it wasn't ever needed, and not to be over meddling or whatever, but just to seem like a safe person was a really important kind of conscious thing that I've wanted to be as a parent. I have one son, and he's the light of my life. And
he's in his 20s.
Yeah, he's about to be 24.
Does your ex-husband still live upstairs?
Yes, yeah. So we have a really great family structure now. Separated, but very friends, really good friends and good parents, in our different ways. I mean, everyone thinks they're a good parent. I hope I am, but I think that we are.
Who inspired you more, your mum or your dad, when you were growing up? Inspired isn't really the right word, but I can't think of the right word.
They were so different. My dad seemed like an invincible person. He was just so deft, is a word I always really like. And he was very much, if he wanted to do something, he would do it. And my mother, she was actually quite similar in a way, but she just didn't have money. So she had no money, and she was a very intrepid and courageous person. And also she loved to read. She just always had a book, and she read to us when we were children. And she had, I think her value system is something I've inherited. Or as a child, my dad was the strong person. He could just do whatever he wanted when he wanted. And I, of course, wanted that. It seemed he could just change things. And my mother didn't have that means, but she certainly had that spirit. And I mean, they both died weirdly in the same week in 2011. And I think, but as time passes and I look and see how, I admire her more and more. They were great role models in their different ways, and also role models in how I don't want to be too.
Gift the remarkable with Marc Jacobs fragrances this holiday season. From the iconic Daisy and Perfect to the all-new Daisy Wild, Marc Jacobs perfume gift sets include everything she needs to feel special. From her favorite fragrance, plus the matching travel spray, holiday gifts don't get much more perfect than this. So if you're looking for a gift inspiration these holidays, gift the remarkable with Marc Jacobs.
When did you kind of develop your, aesthetic, the thing that has been Bella Freud and is still Bella Freud now?
I've always been conscious of clothes as a kind of foil, as a way of feeling safe. When we were little, like my sister Esther wrote this book based on our childhood called Hideous Kinky, which is brilliant. It was about how we went to Morocco and lived in Morocco for 2 years. And I think I was 6 when we set off. When I was there, I quickly learned how to blend in and speak Arabic. The people spoke a dialect of French and Arabic, and I learned that very quickly. And then I remember that I had these certain clothes. I always wore Arabic clothes. We all did, actually. So Mum bought us a couple of things from the market. And I had a lilac-coloured nylon kaftan, and I also had this probably like a viscose cotton print one. And those were my 2 things that I wore all the time. And so I knew when I was wearing those things, I was indigenous to that. I felt part of, I hung around.
Blended.
Yeah. I hung around with the local kids, and I appreciated being part of them, because our family unit, we were very outsider. We didn't fit in anywhere. We weren't like rich hippies. We were poor hippies, which wasn't great at all. And then when we moved back to England, I wanted to, I was very tomboy. I wanted to dress in boys' clothes. I was interested in how boys' clothes this formality that existed in how boys dressed. And I wanted that. I wanted that container. I wanted an edit. I wanted restrictions. And then I'm always banging on about how my school uniform was abolished. They had one. And then as I was kind of pretending I didn't want to wear it, but actually really looking forward to wearing it, they did away with the uniform. And I just loved the idea of people having the same clothes and how different everyone looked in them and what people did to their uniform to make it glamorous.
Yeah, the rolling the skirt up at the waist or doing a different thing with your tie.
But the tie was such a thing. I just was obsessed with the tie. And then, so I was about 8. So when I was 8, 9, I was really conscious of a look that I was into. And then I suppose that evolved. And it sort of, when I then left home when I was 16 and got into the punk. I lived with my older half sister, and she was into punk, and she was like a London girl, and I was just an idiotic, country girl. So I felt really green, as they used to call it then. Clothes have always been a big thing for me, without even really knowing, but I just knew that there were certain ways that if I could dress like that, I would feel strong and free and not preoccupied. And I think, I'm talking to you now and I'm thinking, when I was a child, we always got attention, quite a lot of it negative, because we looked different. My mum would be in a long kaftan. She was incredibly beautiful. So she'd have that people looking at her anyway for being so beautiful and so young. But then she was dressed like a hippie. And it was, in those days, an invitation to just be rude to people. People were really rude and dismissive and sort of looked down on us. And we were like, it was hard, but we were very proud. And Mum was really proud. And so it was a kind of weird feeling, like, I don't want to be like you, but I really object to being objectified as that we're like nothing. And, that's what's great now about everyone dresses so differently. And when someone dresses differently, people think, oh, that's interesting. Something's going on. Even very conventional sort of situations, it's normal now. And it's not it doesn't feel so precarious or dangerous. You don't feel like you're going to be attacked. Well, anyway, it's easy for me to say I don't feel like that. And I know it is always dangerous for anyone when you show yourself, especially young people. There's definitely more love for it than there used to be when I was a child.
When you launched the business, that aesthetic was really quite your aesthetic, the kind of boyish, as opposed to masculine, really, was pretty unusual. I mean, because there'd been the kind of whole 80s shoulder pads, enormous, big mannish jackets. And then I can't even really remember the 90s because I was in this weird phase where I was either working, and then I was with my now husband, who's a bit older than me and had a little boy. So I don't feel like I didn't have my 20s in the 90s, if you know what I mean. But your aesthetic was really unique. And it still is, but at the same time, there's still a lot more women dress the way that your aesthetic has always been.
I suppose I always had this feeling of an idea how I would love to dress people. And it was somewhere between, and you're right when you say it's very much about boyish and not mannish, because I don't want mannish or masculine, but there is a femininity in a boyishness, which I find very attractive, charming. And also, I suppose it suited me a lot because I'm not a very femme-ish woman. I'm more of a boyish type of woman. And so, but I want to look feminine. I don't want to look masculine. And I find turn that picture of Rambo, the poet, in his little jacket with a bow tie, wonky. And I just think that has everything. It's just all distilled in there. And I wanted to make that look, but I also wanted this sexy kind of fascinated by Lady Penelope from the Thunderbirds and how chic she was and her kind of perfect outfits. And there she was so droll as well and low key, and anything to do with like kind of Paris-y type of clothes, this chic thing. So I wanted to try and just, sort of put that all together. And also I was obsessed with Colette's story, her books about Claudine, the very naughty schoolgirl with all her thoughts and her kind of sexual fantasies and stuff. And I just felt all that into my clothes, and it grew out of that. And now I feel that I've figured out a way to make clothes for women who enjoy that. I love suits, but I don't want people to become invisible in them. I want them to become visible in this kind of slinky way, or this safe way that you can feel like a bit more daring. There's something about the shirt and tie that, I find that very sexy. So I love doing that. And it's a soft thing. It's not a strict thing. The tie's very soft. The shirt's very soft. And I think it's suggestive. And I think I'm interested in those kind of interim kind of moments where it's starting to, that feeling of attraction or curiosity is starting to germinate in your own feeling about yourself or someone else who you're hoping to attract the attention of. And I love that moment. And that is something I'm interested in kind of infusing when I'm making clothes, even if they're quite covering up, that they are suggestive.
When you were growing up, was the kind of, I feel like when I was growing up, I was surrounded by girly girls. And I was never a girly girl because I was just like ginger, freckly little, a bit blocky, and just not one of those pretty little blonde girls. And they all had Girls' World, those makeup, those heads. Did you ever see them? They were called Girls' World, and it was a doll's head, and she was very blonde, and you could pull her hair out, make it longer or shorter, and put makeup and stuff on. And I never had one of those, but I didn't really want one. I only wanted one because everybody else had one. But that kind of the way little girls learn to be girls. Did you have that?
No, I didn't, because my mum wasn't like that at all. She wasn't sort of anti, but we never had any. And also I was never interested in that. I had a teddy bear, but I just wasn't interested in dolls. And my mum, she wasn't really like that, I wasn't going against how it was. And even me and my sister, we were quite different. My sister was more, she liked the clothes she had like these patent leather shoes. I don't know where she got these nice things, but I didn't even want them anyway. I remember I had these huge leather gloves, which I must have bought in a jumble sale. There's a photograph of my sister Esther and I with our mum standing in Trafalgar Square when they had the pigeons and you could get a picture taken of you. And Esther's wearing a little rabbit fur coat. I'm wearing this jumper, and I always used to like to wear a kerchief around my neck to be like
raffish.
Yeah. And then I had these huge gloves that I wanted to seem like I could tame a falcon. And I was interested in things like that. So
how old were you then?
I was 8. So I was very into that vibe, and there probably were loads of dolls and stuff, but I wasn't at all, it just was totally off I didn't miss that because luckily I didn't feel left out of that.
Because I was listening to your podcast interview with Trini and her talking about being all dressed up in little dresses and matchy and I was thinking how far that was from your experience.
Yeah. I was definitely got how much a certain outfit was important, but was looking as much like I could, be a gypsy with be hanging around with horses and stuff. That's what I wanted to look like, and I did. And my mum was great at, she was totally with me, and I learnt how to sew. I used to make my own clothes as well and make things for her, and she used to make things for us. Partly because it was cheaper, and so I had very strong codes, but I probably only had a few clothes back in those days. People just didn't have a lot compared to now.
Do you have a lot of clothes now?
I've got loads of clothes. I love having tons of stuff. They're all so useful to me. And obviously I'm really lucky because I design them and then I make, I mostly wear my own things. I realize they are my means to something. If I need to shake myself up a bit, I've got a new collection. I can wear a new suit, and it sounds indulgent, but it's not. It's much more essential than that. And I think part of getting older is re-interesting yourself as often as possible in a new variation. I mean, it's always very subtle. I just got this chocolate brown suit and I didn't think I would wear brown because I love black. And then I tried it on in my shop and it was fantastic. And I thought, yeah, I'm going to try that. It's so fun and it's empowering and it's soothing as well. So those things are things I know I need those in my life because I have to do so many things and, be thinking of new things all the time. So I want to find things to bring to myself that are going to enforce that or make that more likely. And so if I'm like, oh God, am I really wearing this thing again? I know that's not very, I often do, I like my old things too, but I think it's important to have this influx of kind of just shifting things, moving things along up a bit and seeing what happens. And it gives me ideas of, oh yeah, I'd like to do this with the jacket. Or I want to do this or this color scheme, or I want to loosen up a bit in my structure or tighten up a bit. But I like to experiment on myself and see what seems like the right direction.
Has your style changed as you've gotten older?
I've become a bit more daring and I'm better. Often when I'd get dressed, I'd think, oh, I better not. Am I kind of showing out? Am I going to be insecure if I dress up a bit? Now I think, dress up. That's a great starting point. It's much more fun like that instead of trying to hide. I'm always hiding a bit because that's where I feel good. But it's not hiding out. I know how to show myself within quite a lot of covered upness. So I look to do that and not kind of think there's something wrong with that or whatever.
How much has your own body image played into the way you design, do you think?
I think it has played in a lot, especially in the beginning. I think sometimes I would get wrong-footed by hiding too much, like making a slit in the skirt, not as high as it should be, thinking, oh, I better not, I don't want to show, I'm not good enough to have just so much kind of debate about how I felt about my body. But that's the great thing about being a designer. You get to work with models and other people, and I've always loved everyone else's bodies. And but sometimes I think my own hang-ups got in the way, but less so now. I suppose as I get older too, I appreciate the form so much. I think any bit of it that you get a look at is great, or you get to kind of make something that shows someone looking delighted with themselves. I think that's definitely something I'm motivated by now.
Has that growing, increasing interest in newness and new ideas, did that kind of lead into you deciding to do your podcast?
There's lots of things that made me want to do it, but the main driver was how many amazingly funny stories there are in the fashion world. The way people talk about things that have happened and the chat and the code. I never see that. I've never seen, in films where anything films about fashion are often quite boring. I mean, they're very reductive often. And I thought, God, when we're reductive, it's the opposite. It's hilarious. It's a mathematical equation in language that means all this other stuff to us because this is how we live it. And I think you don't see how hard people work in fashion. Fashion, God, it's a hard job. And then with all the reality shows, you just saw that somehow it was as though if you sat on the sofa and watched TV enough, you'd suddenly be a designer. And thinking, God, it's the opposite. Don't sit on the sofa. It's like being a cook. No one imagines a cook is going to understand about ingredients, know how to mix them up, refine them. And fashion is a kitchen. And I just thought, God, there's so many great stories. And with the podcast, my guest lies on the sofa, where you're sitting now. I thought, obviously I'm sort of piss-taking about Sigmund Freud and that relationship. But I also thought, if I could make this work and I could travel around, this would be so I knew that it needed a prop. My prop is my guest is lying on the couch and I'm sitting in a chair. And then I started to get into how I wanted an overhead camera so they could be lying back and we could see into their thoughts or give that feeling. And I wanted to replicate a kind of a feeling that I always try to have in my work, which is about intimacy and feeling when you do get clothes that make you feel your best self, you feel like someone's noticed you. And I want to talk about that and see how other people have felt about these transitional moments in life and why clothes are some of those moments clothes are the gateway to that, and how you kind of find your identity through what you wear, even if your work has nothing to do with how you look. And what a great kind of magical carpet it is. It can take you places that you don't even know how to get there, but sometimes the right outfit can mysteriously get you there. So I'm interested in that when I'm talking to people, and I just thought it would be so much fun as well. It's quite nerve-wracking, and I enjoy that feeling.
I'm always interested in what makes people push themselves to do something new and different when they really don't need to.
No, it's a good question, that. And I know that if I'm not doing that, I feel weirdly like I'm kind of dying. I know it sounds quite extreme, but I am quite emotionally extreme. And I manage it through having things to, that by moving ahead and moving forward. And fashion is especially a difficult arena at the moment, but there are other ways to move things forward or to make things interesting, not just new clothes. So, and this, when I was thinking about this as an idea a few years ago, and I thought, well, if I don't sell a lot in Asia, but maybe, or Japan, where I used to sell a lot, but I know people are really into fashion. This is another way of being fashion, of having conversations. It's like Trojan horse. You can do all sorts you can get in to people's consciousness in other ways. And that I've always been kind of stimulated by that. I love having something that I'm exploring and experimenting with. And sometimes they never come to fruition, but this has.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting. Go to your happy place for a happy price with Priceline's Black Friday sale. Save now and travel later with our best deals of the year.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
I think it's an interesting thing about fashion, though. It seems to me to be, unique in that it's so roundly denigrated. I always felt like if you were a person who was really interested in fashion, there was some kind of assumption that you couldn't read without moving your lips. You know, crazy.
I don't know. Do you think it's still like that? Because
I don't pay attention anymore.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know.
I mean, I think there is still, you know, I think there's an association that if you're interested in your appearance, that you're vain. And it's just another, it's an absurd idea. It's just a way of kind of suppressing people, I suppose. In the 80s, I worked for Vivienne Westwood. And I remember people would laugh out loud at people walking down the street dressed up. And then I sort of realized after a while that they were also laughing because it brought them a lot of pleasure and they didn't really know what else to do. People laughing at you can seem to be a bit hostile, but it depends, you know, it depends how you react. And I thought, okay, that's good to remember. You know, people don't know what to do with their feelings. They're either like, oh, make some sort of remark which is maybe intimidating, or laughing, or now people are much more complimentary to each other in the street. Sometimes people just say, oh, you look great, or sometimes I say that to people. I mean, obviously very careful because you don't want to invade people's spaces and that. But
how great would that make someone feel? Have Bella Freud tell you look great on the street?
I mean, I travel around I go to work on the tube a lot, and I see amazing people dressed amazingly on their way. And I get ideas from that. I really appreciate that. I think people do appreciate that. You think about the person and how clever they are to have come up with that look. And it's not really about fashion, it's about them. Because when an outfit works really well, the person is intriguing. That's the success. But I think it's one of those things that it's been hard to convey, and there haven't been many good things. I mean, there was that film that Isaac Mizrahi made called Unzip, but that was so long ago. And it was brilliant.
I hardly remember when that was.
Oh my God, it was so good. It was hilarious and fantastic and very insightful. And in a funny way, there was that, that series that got really popular in lockdown. Was it called Schitt's Creek?
Yes.
And she just wore these amazing clothes.
She's amazing.
And it was just such a joy. It was so fun. I think people are more into it. And because I used to, sometimes when I'd see people walking around, and especially men sort of dolled up like older men, and thinking, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. And now if I see that, I think, great.
Good for you.
Good. Just do it. Who gives a shit? Just dress up to the nines. If that's what you're into, is wonderful. It's really wonderful. I don't know why I think I know why I was so disparaging. It was because of, growing up and people making a judgment on you for making an effort. So feeling like it's safe to be blending in. And then the whole punk thing changed that a lot.
What does success look like to you now?
Gosh, success. I feel like anxious just at the front.
Yeah.
I think success looks like being able to try out different things and put them into the world, and not to be restrained, and to have a lot on my plate, and to do it all without being someone with an awful schedule. So, I have got a lot of things I need to do, and I remember most of them by having like hundreds of bits of paper scattered about. But I want to be self-reliant too. I have a very small but most sort of incredibly wonderful people I work with, a team. But there aren't many of us, and so everyone's flat out in their jobs, and I need to be flat out in mine. And I find the more I kind of assume I'm capable, the more I am, and then the more I can do. And that makes me feel successful.
Because it's quite something to still be independent after, 34 years?
Something like that, yeah.
Do you think that gives you now more freedom Because obviously you don't have the financial backing of one of the big conglomerates. You know, you can do you.
Yeah. It's not a bad time to be a small business because I can be agile. And I think that's a useful way of knowing how to be. You know, things I can operate on a low budget, and I need to. In a way, my kind of training in life has been to do as much as possible without tons of money. I mean, it's great having some money because it just makes you more, you know, you don't have to plot things. So it's good, that plotting as well, because it makes you think out of the box and
makes you maybe more creative. I don't know.
It depends, because there's a point where you're so financially challenged that nothing ordinary is easy because you have to spend all your time figuring it out. And so that's not good. But when it is just right, it does make you more creative. It makes you ambitious and inventive.
What has been the best thing about getting older?
I think the feeling of freedom is so much greater than it used to be. I feel lucky to be alive. I feel I can reassure myself from my experience in life and have confidence that if I'm struggling with something, that I can come through it. And I really like that. And it's nice, you know, having this experience of life feels like a huge privilege, really.
And the worst?
Oh, the worst is always about like wrinkles and, you know, aches and pains or something. But again, I think the way to kind of find that bearable is by being creative. And then somehow those things aren't so preoccupying. It's no joke, aging. I mean, God, no one can possibly tell you, but it's a shocker. And but if I'm living life to the maximum, then it's okay.
Well, I'm going to ask you the questions I always ask at the end. I bet you've spotted, haven't you? I bet you've done your homework.
I just listened to some, but the only one I tried to think of answering was about giving a fuck about things.
Yeah. Right, let's start. What's your emotional age?
Oh my God. I don't know, because I feel like when I was younger, my emotional age was just living in an era of torture. So I don't know what age that is, but now I feel liberated, relatively calm, but I don't know what age that would equate to, because being younger, managing my sort of moods and sort of anxiety levels was, I don't know, horrible. Just whatever it is, I'm enjoying it.
Give us a book recommendation.
Oh, so many, but right now I'm reading the first volume of Karl Ove Knausgaard's My Struggle.
And how is that?
It's totally riveting. I can hardly put it down. And I read all about him and it when it came out. And, you know, like I was completely fascinated. And then I started reading it a couple of weeks ago, and it's just brilliant. And I feel so connected to it. You know, the way he describes deep feelings, it's everything. I feel like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly it. There's extremes of intense emotion and all the detail. And he describes things in so much detail, yet it's somehow essential. Every single thing, and I think about it, and it just feels like my heart and my gut and my mind are all riveted by this thing. It's not just an intellect thing. When I find a book that I really love, it's like, it reminds me of when I used to read comic books as a child, and I just couldn't wait. The story, but it was laid out so simply. And sometimes a really good, like with Sigmund Freud, I haven't really read any of his work, but I have read comic books.
I'm not sure you're allowed to admit that.
And it was really good. I read this comic book about him and his theories, and I learned everything there. And then I read Sartre wrote a screenplay for John Huston, because John Huston did a film and he asked Sartre to write this screenplay, and he came back and gave it to him, and he said, "This is great, but can you make it shorter?" And so he went off and came back and he'd made it longer. And so he never did it. So I read that, learnt stuff. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, it was how I was able to absorb it. And actually, I'm finding reading this Karl Ove Knausgaard it has the immediacy of that. I just am enjoying that, and I feel so happy that I'm able to read his work and how readable it is.
Has the Freud surname, has that been a blessing or a weight?
Well, I suppose it's both, because when I was growing up, no one had heard of Freud. My parents weren't married, but my mother just gave us, I think she told me that people in the local shops used to call her Mrs. Freud when, in the brief period that they were around together. And then my dad really being my mentor in that work aspect, he never talked about it or made anything of it, and didn't talk about his past hardly at all. And, in a way, I wish I'd asked him more questions.
What advice would you give younger women?
I remember someone saying to me, if you feel weird about something, then it's weird. And that was a really useful, especially being in slightly kind of frightening situations. And I thought, that is a really good bit of advice.
Sat back and now I can't sit.
Sorry, my creaky sofa.
That is such a brilliant bit of advice. It's like that thing that's always doing the rounds on the internet, when someone shows you who they are, believe them, isn't it? And it's about trusting your own judgment, which we're not necessarily trained to do.
Well, especially when someone shows you the bit of them that you like the most, and it's actually the smaller part of them. You keep waiting for the rest of that to emerge, and actually
that was it.
That, it's a tricky one.
That's good advice. Who's your old bird role model?
My what?
Your old bird role model. So who's an older woman who inspires you?
God, older. I don't know if Nan Golden is older than me, but she really inspires me. I look up to her. She's magnificent.
Yeah, she's amazing, isn't she? What is it particularly about her?
I think that she's just not put off by how daunting the task ahead is. And she's an artist of impeccable magnificence.
What's your superpower?
I suppose it's my drive. I have an incredible energy to keep at it.
No sign of any stopping soon, is there?
No, I hope to die on the job.
How many fucks do you give?
Well, I was thinking about this one because I do give a lot of fucks about certain things, and it's to do with adhering to my value system, really. And so I care a lot about that. But I suppose in a more conventional sense, I'm not put off by things that are difficult. But I'm not really into the phrase, I don't give a fuck, because it's just so flattening.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.